Life throws surprises at you when you least expect it, and that night was no different. The house was eerily quiet, my sister in her room, me buried in a book. Midnight struck, the air thickened, and the wind howled outside. Then, a knock. At first, I froze, but I quickly told myself it was just my sister needing something. I opened the door. It was my brother-in-law, swaying, reeking of alcohol. His face was lit dimly by the hallway light, a strange, unsettling grin plastered across it. His bloodshot eyes met mine. "Wife, I miss you so much," he slurred. I stood still, heart racing. Before I could process, he lurched forward, his arms wrapping around me. And then everything changed. I'm Emma, raised in a peaceful countryside where mornings were greeted with birdsong. My parents, humble farmers, loved me unconditionally. But when I turned 20, I left everything behind to pursue an education in the city. I never imagined what awaited me there. Living with my sister and her husband, Luke, felt like stepping into a hurricane, chaotic, fast-paced, and nothing like my quiet life back home. But chaos has a way of becoming familiar, and soon I adjusted. They welcomed me with open arms, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. I thought nothing could go wrong. I couldn't have been more wrong. At first, they kept their distance, polite and respectful. But cracks started to show. Small touches became lingering ones. Quick glances turned into stolen kisses. I'd walk into rooms I wished I hadn't, catching them in moments so private I felt like an intruder. Embarrassed? Hell yes. But I couldn't look away. One Saturday, I went out to study with friends, thinking it was just another ordinary day. When I came back, ordinary was nowhere to be found. They were on the couch, her hands in his hair, his lips locked on hers. My brain screamed to move, but my feet refused. They finally noticed me, and my sister, the devil herself, had the nerve to smirk. "Oh, you're back. How was studying?" My face burned. "Fine," I muttered, desperate to escape. She wasn't letting me off easy. "Why so red? Something wrong?" I forced a laugh, fumbling for casual. "You two are just a lot. It's embarrassing." Luke laughed, deep and amused, while she grinned like a cat with cream. "We're in love, Emma. Don't be shy." I fled to my room, heart racing, stomach churning. Alone, I let out a shaky breath. They were married, so this was normal, right? But it didn't feel normal. Watching them was like watching a scene I wasn't supposed to see, too raw, too intimate. And the worst part? It stirred something inside me I didn't want to admit. Lying on my bed, I tried to shove the thoughts away. They were happy. I should have been happy for them. But deep down, I couldn't stop wondering, what would it feel like to have someone love me like that? Someone who made me feel safe, wanted, adored? Those thoughts became a shadow, creeping into my head at the worst times. While studying, walking home, even in the dead of night. I'd laugh at myself, call it silly, but the longing lingered. Life in that house felt warm, almost like a family of my own. But comfort is a liar, it lets you think everything's fine until it's not. And that day? The one that started so ordinary? It was anything but. That evening started like any other, normal, predictable, safe. I finished up my schoolwork, ready for dinner with my family, the highlight of my day. Walking into the house, the familiar aroma of home-cooked food greeted me. My sister was at her usual spot in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, her face glowing under the warm light. She was the kind of woman who could make a house feel like a home, gentle, devoted, and tirelessly giving. I joined her, diving into the rhythm of chopping, stirring, and laughing at shared memories. Dinner was almost ready, but Luke wasn't home yet. "He's probably stuck at work again," she muttered, checking the clock with a sigh. The phone rang, and after a brief conversation, she hung up, her smile dimmed. "Let's eat without him," she said, brushing it off, but I could feel the weight in her voice. We ate in silence broken by forced small talk. Her eyes betrayed her, drifting toward the empty chair at the table. After dinner, she excused herself to bed, her goodnight kiss on my cheek carrying an unspoken exhaustion. The house settled into stillness. I lingered in the living room before retreating to my room, burying myself in textbooks, hoping the silence would help me focus. But something felt wrong. The wind outside howled louder than usual, and every creak of the house made my skin prickle. Midnight rolled around, and then it happened, a knock, sharp and sudden, shattering the stillness. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Probably my sister, I told myself, shaking off the unease. But when I opened the door, it wasn't her. Luke stood there, swaying, his breath sour with alcohol. The dim hallway light cast shadows over his face, twisting his drunken grin into something almost grotesque. "Wife, I miss you so much," he slurred, stumbling forward. I froze, my voice barely above a whisper. "Luke, it's me. Emma." But he wasn't listening. In a heartbeat, his arms were around me, pulling me close, his words hot against my ear. "Don't push me away. I love you," he murmured, his desperation cutting through the haze of alcohol. My body stiffened, panic clawing its way up my throat. "Luke, stop. I'm not her." I shouted, but his grip tightened, his mind too fogged to comprehend. "I want you. I can't take it anymore," he whispered, his voice raw with longing. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He didn't even know who I was. He wasn't here for me. He was calling for her, the woman he adored, the woman I could never be. But that realization didn't stop the heat rising in my chest, the tangled mess of fear, anger, and something darker. We stumbled back, and before I could stop it, we fell onto my bed. The room shrank around us, the walls pressing in, the air thick with his breath and my racing heartbeat. His touch was everywhere, blurring the lines between reality and a waking nightmare. The man I'd always seen as hers was now here, too close, too much. His whispered words dug into me, breaking something I couldn't name. Fear and confusion swirled in my head, but underneath it all, a twisted, shameful thought whispered back, what if the world outside disappeared? All that remained was the storm within that room, pulling me under into a place I didn't understand and didn't know how to escape. When I finally drifted into sleep, it was a strange, dreamy rest, filled with the warmth of his body beside me. The faint light of dawn crept in through the curtains, and I was jolted awake by my sister's voice calling for him from outside the room. It sounded like a bell ringing, pulling me back into the harsh grip of reality. My heart raced as I opened my eyes, panic setting in. The disarray around me, the tangled sheets, scattered clothes, and Luke still lying there, sleeping soundly, hit me like a punch to the stomach. Guilt surged through me, a wave of panic that made my hands shake as I tried to adjust my clothes, covering the signs of what shouldn't have happened. My sister's voice called again, this time closer, and I jumped. My heart pounded in my chest. I quickly shook Luke awake. "Luke, wake up." His eyes fluttered open, confusion taking over his face. "What's going on? Why am I here?" he mumbled, his gaze wandering around the room as if trying to make sense of the fragments of his memory. The silence between us stretched painfully, both of us unsure of what to do next. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered urgently, "Your sister is calling. You need to hide under the bed, now." He hesitated, then nodded, his expression still dazed. Without another word, he crawled under the bed, and I quickly straightened myself up. After a few moments of frantic adjustments, I took a deep breath and pretended to yawn, walking out of the room with a tired expression plastered on my face. When I opened the door, my sister was standing there, looking at me with mild annoyance. "Why aren't you up yet?" "It's almost time for school," she said. I swallowed, forcing a calm expression. "Sorry, I stayed up too late studying," I lied, my voice betraying my nerves. She eyed me for a second before nodding and turning away. "Get ready, or you'll be late for breakfast." I nodded, trying to keep my composure, and quickly closed the door behind me. Once back in the room, I bent down and whispered, "You need to leave." "She's in the kitchen." Luke crawled out from under the bed, his face still clouded with confusion. He looked at me, and his gaze dropped, filled with regret. "I'm sorry. I don't know what happened last night. I just remember drinking too much." I cut him off, not wanting to hear it. "It doesn't matter. We can't talk about this. Just leave before she suspects anything." He nodded, remorse in his eyes. I pointed to the window. "Climb out that way. Act like you came in from outside." He hesitated, then moved carefully, his every step deliberate and cautious to avoid making any noise. When he finally climbed down safely, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I rushed to change and grab my school stuff, pretending everything was fine. Just then, I heard Luke outside, loudly announcing, "Good morning. So early today." My sister came out, glanced at him, and didn't seem to suspect anything. "Were you at a friend's last night? I didn't see you come home." He awkwardly scratched his head. "I had some work. Got in late. Now I'm starving." She laughed and led him to the table. I quickly slipped out, trying to act casual. No one suspected anything, but in my chest, that nagging worry was still there. After breakfast, as my sister went back to her room, I took a moment to whisper to Luke, "You have to be careful. No one can know." He met my gaze, his eyes full of guilt. "I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it right if I can." I just nodded, saying nothing more. As he left, I watched him walk away, a heavy weight in my chest. I knew things had spiraled out of control, and from that moment, I realized nothing would ever be the same between us. The truth sat like a dark secret, festering. How could I look at my sister, with her bright smile and love for both of us, without crumbling? The guilt wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket, never letting go. Luke became distant, quieter, just as I had. We both kept our distance, trying to avoid drawing attention, but the tension between us was impossible to ignore. Sometimes I'd catch my sister looking at us, confused, but she never suspected. And that broke me a little more each day. I couldn't keep living like this, suffocating under the weight of a secret I could never share. So, after countless sleepless nights, I made a decision. I had to leave. I told my sister I needed space to focus on work and studies. She hesitated, not wanting me to go, but in the end, she agreed. "If that's what you want," she said, her voice laced with concern. "But if things get hard, you'll tell me, right?" I nodded, but my heart twisted with guilt. How could I tell her the real reason I was leaving? To escape my own damn mistakes? The day I left, Luke stood in the corner, silent. As I dragged my suitcase past him, our eyes met, his filled with emotions I couldn't place. I couldn't look at him for long. I just kept my head down and walked out. The door slammed shut behind me, and I thought, that's it. No turning back. But as I stepped out into the cold, part of me hoped that leaving would be the key to finding some peace. In my new, tiny room, I tried to move on. It wasn't easy, but at least I had space to think. Yet, that night, those memories, haunting, vivid, always crept back. I often wondered if I'd done the right thing by staying silent, by walking away. But then I realized, some secrets, when exposed, don't just break you, they break everyone. And I wasn't ready to be the one to shatter her world. As time passed, Luke and I grew distant. Our connection faded, as it had to. We both knew that distance was the only way to protect what little was left. My sister still called often, asking about my life, Luke's, and their plans, the small things that seemed to fill their world. Every time I heard her voice, a strange mix of relief and weight would settle in my chest. She still trusted me, still loved me. I couldn't let her down. Over time, I realized some mistakes can never be undone. But we can change ourselves, learn from them, and make sure we don't repeat them. I learned to forgive myself, not forget, but to keep moving forward. I threw myself into my studies, my work, my newfound independence. The pain and guilt dulled, but the lesson from that night stayed with me, etched in my mind. I've learned that moments of weakness, decisions made in the haze of emotion, can shape your entire life. My mistake didn't just affect me, it shattered something in my family. It was a painful lesson in emotional control, boundaries, and responsibility. If I could offer one piece of advice, in any relationship, stay sober, stay grounded. Never let a fleeting emotion cloud your judgment and risk losing what you have. When you mess up, don't run from it. Face it. Fix it. Do the right thing. And above all, learn to forgive yourself, but never forget the lessons your mistakes taught you. Life's never easy, but every challenge is an opportunity to grow, to become better, and to build a future that's worth something. Thank you for listening. I hope my story helps you find a little clarity and strength.